Hello and welcome to another one of my videos. Today I'd like to discuss a slightly sensitive topic of pornography and I guess addiction to it, really. And it's something probably I've been hooked on. Probably is the biggest challenge I actually ever had. Because, one, it's to a certain extent, there's a certain amount of social acceptance of porn and stuff and everything that's kind of associated with it. It's just one of these things, isn't it? You don't really kind of think of it in terms of like it's hooks upon you inside. And with the advent of the internet has made this aspect of our culture something that can be easily accessed at any time. And really, there are many aspects to it in terms of like whether it's ethical, whether it's unethical. And I think there's good arguments for either side. Sexuality in itself, I think, is maligned by the greater good of or supposedly the greater good of society as a whole, because it seems to suggest a slightly kind of rebellious and somewhat untamed part of our psyche. But when we kind of engage in sexual release through actual kind of like a viewing of like porn, especially on the internet these days, which is, I guess, is one of these things that I've come to actually kind of realize that, having not grown up with the internet per se, it wasn't accessible all the time. Now, with the fundamentals of neuroplasticity, of the pathways of the brain, the endorphin rush that you actually get from viewing these things, and the subsequent rabbit hole which you disappear down once you actually kind of look at these things on the internet, because it allows you to funnel into more and more areas, and there's just everything. It's just information and entertainment on this worldwide level is just unbarred. There's no kind of barrier as to what you can then watch. And I guess it's be interesting to see how it actually affects. And I think there is quite a few negative effects which would result from generations born in this era, as to how they would then engage in sexual like encounters, because essentially it teaches us certain misguided approaches to sexuality which are untrue. I mean, it's a fantasy to start off with, but because subsequently generations growing up in this era have actually kind of seen it as the way it is, possibly have misjudged it as possibly the way that you should act, it has many negative aspects as to interactions between men and women, and men and men, and women and women, I guess, on all kind of like sexual fronts. Because if that is our one tool to learn with, to learn how to engage in the sexual act, then it misguides us. And I'm not entirely sold, like I said, on the fact that it's actually either ethical or unethical. I'm sure there's aspects of both. I don't think sexuality in itself is always viewed as something, I guess, in modern society, is slightly bad, and subsequently those who engaged in the filming of such films are seen as kind of bad people, which I don't necessarily think is correct. I mean, some of them are kind of subject to abuse. Some of them are actually kind of in contracts and have been appropriated by nefarious means to engage in this activity, and some of them have done it of their own free will. And to actually lump them all in the same kind of category and to see the world as black and white is not a good thing. However, I think it's mainly the addiction to it is something that has to be examined. With all addictions, myself, this is probably one of the hardest ones I've had to actually kind of overcome, because it is just one of these things that it was never really, I never really considered it something that really had its hooks in me. And I guess to a certain extent, that's what you think with all addictions, really, unless you can actually confront this particular aspect of yourself and then just mindfully kind of hold it in the space and just say, I wonder if I can do without it. I wonder if I can actually remove myself from it, and how will I deal with it thereafter? And what void does it leave within me? Because I've gotten so used to it. And that is probably something that you probably, not, like I said, not to place any judgment on anyone, but if you find you are engaging in any activity which may have negative aspects on your perception of the world, then it is probably a better thing to actually to examine it and remove yourself from it, so as to kind of discover the things that are really affecting you in life. Anyway, that was just a brief chat about it, my personal experience with it, and you may have different opinions on it, but as with all addictions, I think it's something that needs to be looked at, and the first road to recovery and road to spiritual kind of completion and healing, be it psychological, spiritual, or emotional, is to look upon something and actually ask yourself sincerely whether it's something that affects you. So yeah, that's my take on it.